Hey, it's Rod Yates here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned along the way. And my special guest for the next hour is legendary producer, engineer, and mixer, Joe Chiccarelli. A man who's won 10 Grammys and Latin Grammys, and over the course of his 40-plus year career worked with artists as diverse as Elton John, Oxbow, Frank Zappa, Morrissey, The Shins, The Strokes, Tori Amos, U2. I could go on. We talk about a lot of those experiences in this interview, as well as the complexities of being a producer, how Joe got into the business, and a whole lot more. When I spoke with Joe, I was in Sydney and he was in his studio in LA's Sunset Sound Complex, where he was fresh off working with a band called Cayucas and in the middle of working with an artist called Percy Howard. And even after all these years, Joe's excitement about both projects was as undeniable as it was infectious. Joe Chiccarelli is clearly a man who loves making records, as you're about to find out. One of the things when you look at your body of work is that it's genre agnostic. You've got Oxbow on there, you've got Elton John, you've got Frank Zappa, Alanis Morissette, The Shins. Is that how you were raised musically?
Yeah, I think that's part of it for sure. I listen to anything and everything. I listen to a lot of jazz. I listen to pop. I listen to hip hop. I listen to anything, and I'm always curious. And first of all, I feel like if I did just one genre of music, I would very quickly get pigeonholed. And I think that would make for a short career, perhaps a very successful one, but a very short one, maybe. And I also feel like for myself, I need the challenge. I need to try different things. I hate getting in a rut, in a hole, in a routine where I always use this mic or I always use this setup or, I like to put myself sort of at risk and in a territory that's maybe not comfortable all the time, because I find that, number one, not having the experience perhaps in that genre, you kind of bring a very outsider's influence into it, and you maybe make for a more unique production because you're a little bit outside your element, So I have over the years tried to really dance around from genre to genre. The negative is that when it comes to A&R people and record companies, they want to know what a producer does and who to hire for what project. And it's come to my attention more than once where a record company A&R guy has said to me, I don't know what you do. One minute, you're working on this thing that's a very intimate singer-songwriter, and the next minute you're working on this really heavy, monstrous, industrial thing, and I don't know what your sound is. And and I've hoped over the years that I don't have a sound, that I really don't have a stamp or a signature, that, I've always felt like I want to make the record for the artist. I want to, certainly I have a vision of my own, an opinion of my own of what I think they should do or shouldn't do, especially shouldn't do. But I really try to make a unique record for each and every artist that I work with.
You mentioned A&R just then, and I always wonder ultimately who is your responsibility to as a producer, because the artist and the A&R may quite often have different points of view about what they want to achieve, but you also have a responsibility to both parties, I imagine. How do you walk that fine line?
It is a fine line indeed. It's definitely tricky. Some situations are tougher than others. Sometimes everybody is on the same page exactly. Ultimately, it's the artist record, and you've got to side with them. I mean, I try to just keep things really transparent, really open, and just say, hey, I know you want to do this crazy polka beat on the song, but the record label feels this is the single. And my guess is that that beat is not going to be the most popular thing at rock radio at this moment. So I would encourage you to do something that's a bit more straightforward. I mean, no, I really do try to keep it fair and honest, and and I also try to invite the A&R or the manager into the session, and really make sure that they're loving stuff and they feel we are on the same page. And that's kind of worked both positive and negative. I mean, it's tough when you perhaps have a manager who's very opinionated, and even if he's very positive in his statements about things, sometimes then it makes the artist maybe not work as hard, or chill a little too much, or maybe not push as much, or be satisfied that the manager is happy and maybe he isn't happy. So it's really tricky inviting somebody into the sessions. I mean, I have a lot of producer friends that just will not do it. When it's done, we'll play it for you. And it's like, wow, if you can get away with that, that's great. But
right.
No, I truly like to have everybody on the same team.
I feel like your role really is producer, engineer, mixer, psychologist, diplomat.
Unquestionably. No, I often say I wish that I had had more years of psychology in college before I decided to do this, that would have come in more handy than playing in bands or learning engineering or any of that stuff.
The fact that you, because you were an artist for quite a long time. You played bass.
I played bass
around Boston.
Yeah, in a bunch of bands. But I mean, I wouldn't call myself an artist. I wouldn't even call myself a bass player.
Really?
No, I was terrible. I barely got by. The band, none of the bands were successful. It was just. I was always fascinated with the studio and making records, and as a result, I wasn't dedicated to my instrument. I didn't really want to take the time to really practice and rehearse, and I was always interested in the recording or the demos or the sound of the band or the concept of the band or the way the PA sounded or the way the drums sounded or whatever it was. I was kind of more interested in things outside of myself, if you will.
And is that what inspired you to get a 4-track?
Yeah, for sure. I think I got my first tape machine because a friend of mine had a band and I was curious about recording them. So I got an old Ampex portable, not a big studio Ampex, but a consumer Ampex 2-track, and would go over their house during rehearsals and record them, and then I ended up getting a TAC 4-track and then more stuff, and eventually got a job at a studio and kind of learned the studio, and then eventually moved to LA and got an assisting job at Cherokee Studios, and all of a sudden I was now in the professional music making business.
Yeah. That first gig at a studio, was that your cousin's studio in Boston, Fleetwood
so
Studios?
I had a cousin that owned a studio outside of Boston, and I would go there and just pester the engineer and ask questions, too many questions, and hang around sessions too long, and I was just a nuisance. And but he was kind and really taught me a lot, and taught me from a very by the book way of making records. And not that he wasn't a creative person or anything, but definitely came from a generation where this was how you recorded. And it honestly took me working with Frank Zappa to realize that, whoa, there's other ways of making records. And maybe even before that, I got to assist for Roy Thomas Baker on a few records. And Roy is just a really radical record maker. And I basically saw somebody break all the rules. but I loved what he was doing. I loved the results. And it sort of made me realize, like, whoa, there's more than one way of doing this, And then working with Frank, Frank was all about breaking the rules and all about coming up with sounds and characters that were unusual and challenging, and just things didn't sound like other records. They just had to sound crazy and unique and honest to his world, And I realized that, I was kind of in his world making his record, where when I went off to work with another artist, it's about their world. So you do need to kind of dive in deep and figure out what that artist and what that particular record is all about, and how to give it its personality.
I mean, I'd like to talk to you further about both Roy and Frank. And I think you met them both when you were assisting at Cherokee Studios. What was just Cherokee in general at that time? Like, when was that? And what was
it was like
Cherokee
early
Studios
80s.
like?
Cherokee was a hub. They had Trident A-range consoles. So they got a lot of the UK producers and UK artists. And I mean, it was amazing, because one day there would be Genesis, and the next day it was the Bee Gees, and then Bob Seger, and then Journey. And, the next day it was Etta James, and the day after that it was Barbra Streisand. And, so it was at A level all the time. And what hit me within the first few days of being there was that I felt like anything I had done prior to this was irrelevant, that it was, the minor leagues compared to this. The studio musicians were incredible, just all virtuosos, and on top of it, the nicest people. Everybody was just willing to help, because I was really very green, and everybody was really open, and kind of took you under their wing, and it was really, really a great scene. And at the time, I feel like all the studios in LA, there was a scene and a camaraderie. With Frank, we worked a lot at Village Recording Studios, and there was a great scene there. All the assistants and all the engineers, everybody knew each other and hung out and shared information. And the one thing that happens and now is that everybody works at home. Everybody's in isolation. And the only knowledge of making records that you get is what you read or what you hear on a podcast or whatever. And the idea of walking down the hall and seeing somebody's setup that's different from yours, or talking to that producer and going, oh, you're using that, or you do that, or you don't do that, and why is it that you do that? That's interesting, So you really learned a lot of tricks and secrets and different approaches from all the people. So as an assistant engineer, to get to work with all these great people was fantastic. And people would sometimes do the total opposite of things. And the thing where the light bulb goes off and it's life-changing is you go and you steal somebody's drum setup because you saw somebody down the hall set their drum kit up a certain way and use certain mics, etc. And you go and do that, and you cop everything, and you listen to it, and it's usually terrible. And you have to then figure out it's why they did it in that particular style, and what the end result was that they were trying to achieve, what the style of music was, and how so many things dictated that approach. So you kind of had to get into the head of the engineer or producer or project that you were sort of copying from. And once you started to figure that out and sort of reverse engineer it, then things kind of made sense. You saw why people did what they did. And, I would see the same engineer on one project and then on another project. And one project, he was very, very aggressive in his EQ and compression. On the next project, there was none. And, you realize that they were doing what was appropriate for the music. And, so you had to really commit to that particular project, that particular music, that album, that sound, and then do what it took to get the result.
What an incredible education, incredible place to be educated. And you mentioned Roy a couple of times there. So which albums did you assist Roy on?
Two Journey albums and a couple of other projects. He was there a lot at Cherokee. And for me, the thing was that, he was very radical in his approach and, a lot of microphones, a lot of processing, and never afraid to do it. It was just whatever it took. And it doesn't matter what the compressor looked like or the EQ or where the mic was, as long as it was right for the sound of the record. And, you would look over the desk and there would be, equalizers plugged into another equalizer, into a compressor, and then yet another compressor. And you'd be you're not supposed to do that, but it sounds amazing, so that you start to then take more chances yourself. And yeah, it was very, very freeing working with Roy. And I mean, his records still stand up. I mean, you hear the Cars or Queen or any of that stuff on the radio, and they're powerful and exciting.
So George Martin, I think, was another producer that you assisted at Cherokee.
Yeah.
What did you work on with George, and what did you learn from George?
There was a Jimmy Webb album, and there was also the Sgt. Pepper movie. He came back to Cherokee to work on that. And it was Jeff Emmerich Engineering, who was just wonderful, sweet gentleman, just so great. And, George was the ultimate gentleman, and so kind and so nice with the artists and everybody around him. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. Yeah.
Lovely. And I think, so on to Frank Zappa, who you mentioned. I believe you were around about 20 when you first sort of encountered Frank. And the album that you initially ended up assisting on was Shake Your Booty. And then after working with Frank for a short period of time, you obviously bonded, and he asked you to continue working on that record outside of Cherokee. And I think I've seen a quote from you where you said you learned very quickly with Frank that you didn't say no. What did you mean by that?
Well, he always wanted to push things. He always wanted to get crazier with the sounds, or get more experimental, or do things that might seem like they were breaking the rules, or they weren't good audio, good fidelity, conscious decisions. And you had to trust him, because he saw so far down the line in terms of where he was going musically, sonically, that you just had to get on the bus and, trust that he knew where the road was going. And he always did. I mean, there were times that you'd be doing things that, would just be one piece of a song, and you'd work on it for a long time and just think what does this matter, or whatever. And then, a couple of days later, something else would get scrapped and put in its place. And all of a sudden, that little piece that you worked on forever, all of a sudden made sense, because the big picture around it had changed. And Frank knew where he was going, So you learned really a sense of trusting the artist and trusting the other people that you work with.
Did you sense while you were working on those records with him, because you worked on several records, I think about half a dozen with Frank, did you sense that the importance or the relevance of the music you were making at the time, or were you just
no? I don't think you ever do. I don't think you ever do. And usually when you think something is important or good, No one usually cares about it, in the end. It's those ones that, everybody kind of in the process goes, yeah, it's good, it's nice, it's whatever. And, you know, those are the ones that kind of sneak up on people. The ones that in my life that I've gone like, this is amazing. This is the stuff. This is like killer. This is so unique. People hear it, and usually those responses that it's nice. Yeah, it's nice. And, the thing that a good friend of mine once said to me, and it was specifically directed at me, I think you do your best work when you don't care. And
Right.
meaning that, when you really don't care, you don't give a shit, you just try things, you do goofy shit, you not so precious about everything. And that really makes a difference. And I think, if one can be that way all the time and not be so tight about it and so caring about every detail, sometimes it's, in a mix or in anything, it's those moments that just are wrong that end up being right, because they're the ones that stand out from the picture and make you go, whoa, what's that? Working with Jack White was really great in that, because Jack really understands performance, and he is passionate about great, unique performances. And he'll keep all the warts and flaws because they kind of humanize it and they make it sound different and not pristine and all boxed in. And he's really incredible like that. He knows, he really, one of the tricks of this is really knowing when to stop, knowing when a record is done and when it's baked or when it's overbaked. And Jack is just so good at that. And obviously he leans to maybe a more minimalistic side of it, but just the same, he understands when it's achieving the right emotional effect.
Who else have you learned from in that regard? Because obviously you learned a lot from Frank and Roy, who we spoke about earlier, and now Jack White. Are there other people that you've left the session a different producer or engineer?
Oh, I mean, I think you learn from every project, I think you learn things like when to back off, when to trust the artist, and when to, I mean, I'm just thinking the other day, there was a track that we were working on, and
With Jack?
no, not sorry, with an artist, and it was just a new artist, and we were working on it, and kind of had a direction in mind, and everything was sounding correct and appropriate and sensitive and just right for the music. And there was a part of me that was like, well, this is all correct, and yeah, I guess this is right for the song, and and there was also at the same time I'm thinking like, I don't really like this at all. This is just boring. And all the musicians, the studio musicians, are invested in this, and they really think this is great. And I'm not feeling it. It doesn't feel special enough to me. It's all correct. It's all good. It's tasty. It's well played, musical. It's nothing wrong with it, but yet there's nothing unique about it. And I just finally had to kind of get up the courage and say to everybody, look, I think what we're doing is good. It's appropriate for the song. We know what that is. We got a couple of takes of it. Let's just put it aside. Let's just fuck things up. Let's just distort the hell out of the bass. Let's try some weird broken up beat. Let's just slow it down a little bit. Let's just do something that's wrong. And within a take and a half, it was transformed, and everybody went in their own different directions is what I was trying to get to, that sometimes when everything is just in its right place and smooth and everybody's playing the appropriate thing, it's just boring. But when there's those elements that fight each other and there's that sense of imbalance and you start questioning, like, what is this? This doesn't sound like anything. I don't understand this. All of a sudden you're engaged and you're like, wow, this is
Right.
unique. I don't know what this is. I'm scared. I can't figure this out. You know, I mean, that's a reaction. I mean, I think the worst thing you can ever have is, like I was saying earlier, something where everybody says, oh, that's nice. You know, it's
Sure.
like death. So I think, so for me personally, in that moment, I learned that, like, I got to stop the train when my gut is telling me that, yeah, it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's appropriate. But it's not challenging me. It's not getting me excited. That, I gotta stand up and have the courage to pull the plug, and say, okay, I know we've invested time and money and emotion in this, but we got to try something else.
Do you think in some ways, even in a small way, that way of thinking was injected into your DNA from those sessions with Frank? Do you think that kind of changed your mindset?
Frank and everybody, because at the time, you have to understand, the average record budget for a new artist might have been $150 to $250, $300,000, and most records were costing $300,000 to $1 million for a major artist. So people took the time to really invest in the record, and you would track something, and maybe even work on it for a few days or whatever, and somebody would just say, it's not working, let's just scrap it and do something else. But often now budgets dictate that you got to go fast, and that you've got to go into it with a plan and attack it, because you don't have those kind of dollars and time to experiment. I mean, obviously, if you're in your bedroom on your own and this is a labor of love, you can do that. But for the average artist that's signed to a label, major or independent, there's a restriction on the time. And a lot of people have said that all records are never completed. They're just abandoned, I mean, that's very cynical, but it's kind of true. At some point, somebody says, like, we're out of money, we're out of time, or I'm spent emotionally, and that's it, But, I mean, this is a reality of it,
Sure.
But I think that you've got to fight for it, and you got to just sometimes push through a wall, That's difficult for new artists at times, because I think sometimes maybe with bands, they're sort of like, well, this is my part and this is what I've always played and this seems okay and no one's complained about it. And why are we all of a sudden changing this or trying something different or trying to push through to some other place? I can't envision anything else, because I've been doing the same thing for a while, and that can get tense with young bands. It can get just tricky emotionally, and people can kind of lose the spark, because you're just digging deeper in the dirt to try to get to a more unique place with something, and they're not used to doing that. They're used to kind of showing up in their rehearsal room and making their noise, and that's it. And now some guy comes in the mix and is like, well, did you ever think that maybe it could be a bigger and better beast if you did this or did that? And the question is, well, why do we have to do that? Well, okay, how far do you want to go with this? And you also, as a producer, have to say, okay, this is their debut record. Is where they're at enough? Is it captivating enough? Or does it need to be something more to fit in with the musical landscape of the time, or even more so, the landscape of 6 months to a year from now when this will get released? And does it sound like yesterday. If it sounds like yesterday, then you're going to be in trouble a year from now when the record hits the streets. So you do have to think of all those things in terms of, any production I take on. There's definitely a weight of how does this fit in the world.
Well, there's so much to consider. And you mentioned earlier that just with budgets, people just don't have the time anymore, or as much time anymore. But I've also seen you say that the real magic quite often comes very quickly when there just isn't that time for self-doubt. Have there been examples in your career where you have witnessed that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything from doing a song that no one maybe felt that great or attached to, and all of a sudden that becomes the key track. That's happened to me more than once. Even with Young the Giant, their first single was a song called My Body, and it was not the tune that the record company was focused on. So I don't want to say not a lot of effort was put into the song, because it was. I mean, I spent a lot of time with the band working in pre-production, working on arrangements and grooves and that sort of thing. But perhaps had the record company been more forceful about concentrating on other songs, that song could have been pushed by the wayside. But, everybody else believed in it and it was fun, and, just kind of went for it and didn't think about it too much, Vocals, that's always a thing. How many times the guide vocal that the singer sings with the basic track while he's guiding the band through it. There's an energy there's a spirit. He's in the room with the band perhaps, or he's just goofing off and trying things, and all of a sudden changes the phrasing or whatever it might be, and you're like, that's pretty hooky, Yeah, so there's definitely, and I think as a producer, you have to be constantly aware of all that. In other words, you have to know when that weird slip up, that mistake, if you will, is a mistake, and other times it's like, no, that's really good. That's something to almost build the whole track around. I mean, so often, when maybe somebody is in rehearsal, or when the players are out in the room getting their sounds, they start to play not a perfect version of a part. In other words, they're experimenting to find a part, and they'll play a more broken up or maybe even wrong because they can't quite remember what the chord changes are. And all of a sudden you go, oh, that wrong part over the right chords could be tonally really interesting. Hey, can you remember what you just played? Can you just play that again? Can we try that over the chorus? Because that could be really cool. So I think you have to be always present and aware of those moments that, might really turn a song inside out.
After the break, Joe talks about working with Etta James and Elton John, battling imposter syndrome, dealing with difficult conversations in the studio, and much more. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Joe Chiccarelli. You were talking about vocals earlier and reminded me of one of the incredible vocalists you worked with, Etta James. Can you explain how it felt like being on the other side of the studio glass when she was in the vocal booth or wherever she was that she was recording?
Yeah. Etta really holds such special part of my heart. I mean, she's just the greatest person and an amazing singer, and was so nice to me coming up. And I met her when I was an assistant and was very young. And I had known her name and kind of maybe known Tell Mama or At Last, which were her early hits when she was very young. But when I saw her sing in the studio and saw the level of passion that she put into a performance in the studio, I mean, she would jump off the ground when she was doing vocal takes. I mean, honestly, like lift 3-4 feet off the ground and just tear into the microphone. I was just blown away. I'd never seen this. I'd gone to like, gospel churches and witnessed that, but there was something about Etta, and it was done quickly. And it was take one or take two. And we did albums later on together. I became such a fan of hers that I was kind of like this glowing little fanboy and sort of bonded myself to her because of that. And she was so kind that when I finally left Cherokee and had a career as an independent engineer, she called on me many times to work with her on albums and different projects, and and was so kind and trusted me and gave me space to do my gig. And she could have always looked at me as the little assistant engineer, and somehow my belief in her and my respect of what she did allowed her to respect me and give me a shot at working with her. Like she was so kind. And certainly the thing I learned is that as an engineer or a producer, you gotta be ready first take, because in her case, man, she could come in at 10:30 in the morning and like deliver a take that was mind-blowing. One take, song's done. Elton John, wow. Same way, just performances. Morrissey, performances. I mean, with Morrissey, I can't tell you how many guide vocals that I've used on the record, because with him, everything he does in that guide vocal really implies where the song needs to go, like where it needs to get big and where it needs to be intimate, and where it needs to speed up, and where it needs to get twisted and amazing. And I think a lot of those kind of, I don't want to say older school singers, but those people that sort of aren't the American Idol generation of singers really come from that place of understanding the big picture. And that's the first and foremost thing. And I've been fortunate with Morrissey to do like 4 or 5 albums with him, and what he brings to an album in terms of his sense of melody and lyrics and vocal performances is outstanding. I mean, he really is a one of a kind special artist. I mean, I've not witnessed on a songwriting level. I mean, Elton perhaps is in that same place, obviously very different musically and very different influences, but Elton's one of those people that, can pull this melody from the air, and you're like, how did he hear that in those changes? And Morrissey, I mean, I've heard the demos that the song started with, and you're sort of like, oh, those are nice, it could be a good song. And then you hear what he puts on top of it, and you're like, where did that melody exist? Because I don't hear it in here, but really special. But yeah.
And you've mentioned 2 icons there, well, 3 icons in Etta, Morrissey, and Elton. When did you feel like you belonged in the room with people such as this?
Never. Are you serious? Never. Oh, are you kidding me? I feel like I've said this before. I always feel like there's gonna come a day when people figure out that I have no clue what I'm doing, that I don't belong here, that I'm not in this league. Every single day I'm in here, I just feel like, oh God, get me through this. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just floundering around. Like just this morning, I was just one finger playing keyboards on something because I really felt like one section of the song needed something, and I'm just like, I don't know, maybe this will work, and I think I'm really fortunate in that I've gotten in the room with a lot of great artists, and you work with a great artist, you got a better chance of making a great record. It's not about me. I'm just like trying to get by.
But the Grammy Awards and, the commercial and critical successes of the records that you work on, they don't go any way to calming that voice, into quietening that voice in you, that self-doubt?
Maybe for a minute, but then the next project you do is stiff and you're back to reality. You're like, oh God, am I clueless? So yeah, I mean, obviously that stuff is nice and it's a nice pat on the back and it is encouraging and all, but I think, I'm constantly trying to make a great record. I'm constantly trying to make something that I feel, lives up to a classic standard, whether it's Miles Davis or Talking Heads or whatever. I think I have a bar that I'd like to see met, and probably unrealistic at times, but it's still there, at the very least for me personally. And I probably drive a lot of the people that I work with crazy because, I'm always pushing for something. And I don't want to say that they're not pushing, but maybe my own expectation or goal for myself is beyond realistic given the specific situation.
How acutely do you feel the commercial and critical successes and failures of records that you work on? Do you feel it as acutely as the artist?
Absolutely. Like seeing a bad review of something is crushing. I mean, I don't mind seeing a bad review if the reviewer gets it right, if they really understand why the record's not working and, kind of perhaps even echo the things that I had questions about along the way. It's okay. But sometimes, reviewers can, they're human and just they don't get the style of music or they had a bad day or whatever. And the review is not encouraging. And yeah, that really hurts. And you feel like, oh, okay, they finally found me out. I'm clueless, I'm sorry.
Not at all.
It's true.
No, I think it's very revealing. And you get a similar story when you talk to artists who have achieved a lot. That sense of imposter syndrome never tends to go away. In terms of feeling that, the success and failure of a record, when you work with artists like the White Stripes making Icky Thump or the Strokes making Angles, both bands with a lot of attention on them, a lot of commercial things at risk, do you also feel the pressure that they might be feeling? Do you feel that sense of expectation that this has to match the commercial pressure?
I think going into the record, before I start the record, I feel that from moment to moment. But once I'm in the record, I think you're so caught up in the details of making it and making every part of it great that you don't really look to other records in their catalog and compare it to, or at least I don't. I mean, I think I'd really drive myself and certainly would drive the artist crazy and really just make them feel insecure if I did that to them. But yeah, I mean, certainly I think it's normal that at some point you go, wow, okay, you get the demos. Are these songs living up to the last album that I loved so much? If not, then I got to go back to the artist and say, hey, I think we need a couple more. We're not ready to start. Or maybe we should go in and track these 6 and then in a month go back and track some more, or, whatever it takes to get what you need. But yeah, I don't get too caught up in the past. I really don't, in general, try not to live in the past. I'm always just forward, what's new, what's the future, where can you go, what could it be. I never want to go backwards.
Do you still, after all these years, do you still see the romance in making a record?
Of course. I mean, I'm here doing it every day, and it's it's an amazing. I probably live for those magical moments that happen when everything just glues together and it doesn't make sense why this thing feels so great. If you dissect the pieces, they're not that unique, but you put it all together and there's this explosion that happens. There's this thing where it just clicks and works, and it's magic. It's religious. It's just something extraordinary. I mean, I think ultimately those are the moments that I live for, and I think that, in a sense, every time I go in to make an album with somebody, it's like, okay, another chance at bat. Okay,
Right.
another chance that maybe I can make something that I'm satisfied with, and the artist is satisfied with, and the best, most encouraging moments are those. Like, I'm just remembering that at the end of last week, this band that I did an album with, and the album is coming out in the next month, and singles are coming out, and the band is actually thankfully touring. They're out on the road.
Are you able to say who they are?
This band called Lily, Lily. They're really unique. Really, they're kind of tapped into the UK scene with like Squid and Black Midi and Black Country New Road, and those kind of bands that are, I don't want to call them noise bands, but they're kind of mathy, but dark and noisy and moody, and that's definitely one side of their influences. And at the same time, there's a heavier side to them that maybe, I don't know, what the channel, but what was really, really satisfying and nice is that last week, a couple of guys in the band texted me saying like, wow, we're finally a year away from the record. We're out on the road touring, and we get it. We understand what your contribution was, and we're so thankful that you helped us make a better record. We see it now. And like I was saying earlier, when you're in the depths of it, you're like, why is this so hard? Why is this, not that it's always hard, but there are moments, and, it can be frustrating and filled with a lot of self-doubt. But, that time when you finally share the work with other people, or it's the record company that hears it and loves it, or the friends hear it and go, oh my God, this is the best thing you've ever done. That's so satisfying to
Right.
have the artist come back to you and say, wow, this was really great. We worked hard, and we actually have something that we're proud of. Because I mean, just like me, and I think you said it earlier, that, artists are insecure and artists are pushing themselves all the time, and they need that feedback and they need that encouragement. And we've kind of been talking about the side of the job that is hard work. We haven't been talking about the side of the producer's job that is about being a cheerleader and a psychologist and being the positive force in the room that pushes people onward. And it's like, no, it's great, keep going, don't stop, it's great. That's so much a part of it too, is that you do have to be this light at the same time that you have to be this ugly reality check, and it's a pretty schizophrenic job at times.
And a skill that I imagine is learned over decades.
Yes, it
quite
is.
literally in this case.
It is definitely something that you learn. I've said this to people before that are just starting out, and they get caught up in some little detail of making the record. And I said, like the moment you feel you're so caught up in that detail, that's when you need to step back and look at the big picture and forget about the detail. And when you can develop this ability to switch back and forth between the big picture and the little details, that's when you're really starting to develop yourself as a record maker, or as an artist, or a music maker. That you've got to be able to constantly switch. And I see it in the great studio musicians I work with, that their ability to dive into a part and work on the nuances of it, but in a flash they can say, it's not working, it's not right for the artist, it's the wrong color. And certain artists are really great about saying, like, wow, this part's really, really good, really clever, really interesting, but it's not me, it's not us, it's too clever, too nuanced, too whatever, not raw enough. And that can be tough in the situation, because you've been working on it for a while, everybody's invested in it, and then somebody has the ability to take the step back and see the big picture and go, okay, yeah, it works, but it's too straight for us, or too quirky for us, or too adventurous for us, or whatever it might be. That's always a trying moment in a production.
Yeah, so many. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So many different pieces falling into place. Which you mentioned Elton John earlier. I forget the record. I think there's been a couple of times when you've worked with Elton.
Yeah, primarily what I worked with him on was an album called Songs from the West Coast. It was maybe 2002, something like that. Pat Leonard produced it, and I just engineered it. And it was great, just because he really is such a creative force, and to be there with him in the studio while he's writing the songs, because he does write everything right there in the studio. Obviously, Bernie Taupin writes all the lyrics, but Elton puts the song together right there in front of you and does it really quickly. And it's quite magical to see something come together like that. It's really like watching a great painter or something. I don't even know how to describe it. I've never seen anyone like the way he just sits down at the piano, looks at these lyrics that in some cases he's never seen before, and in a matter of 15, 20 minutes, he's writing music that fits so well with these lyrics, that conveys the mood of it, that's hooky, and in 45 minutes, the song is done. And from what I understand from him and the band, they've said he's never taken more than 45 minutes to write a song in his life. And, it's quite a magical experience,
To witness that is something which so few people actually get the opportunity to do. Do you find yourself, are you able just to ever take a moment to step out of your professional capacity and just sit back and watch?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, certainly at times, he's speaking into the control room and saying, hey, do you like this chord here, or do you like this chord there? Or what do you think the feel should be? Here's one option for the bridge. Here's another option. Here's another option. But at the same time, you're looking at your watch going, we just started this 15 minutes ago and the song is almost done and it feels pretty great to me. Is this right? And you sit there and you think, well, this can't be any good because it's going so quickly. The song's got to be terrible, and
Right.
Of course it's not. And he came from a place where he was really a hired songwriter. He kind of grew up in a music house where people sent their poems in and he put music to people's poems and all. So he kind of had that skill, but this is at a whole other level. That combined with the sort of magical, mystical part of it, he's an absolute anomaly. And the one thing that you come out of it going like, why can't everything be like this? Why can't everything be this spiritual, this moment? And he just like, it's another day at the office for him. I mean, he comes in at 10 o'clock and, is writing a song, and you're going, these songs, even the ones that we're considering as B-sides, they're better than most of the stuff I've worked on the last year, It's crazy. I mean, he's really special. And on top of that, he's such a wonderful, down-to-earth, fun guy. I mean, he just makes the whole experience really, really great. And he's so unique, and what he does for charities and what he's done for other performers, how he'll take somebody that he believes in under his wing and really introduce them to people and champion their music and his knowledge of music. I mean, he would go, this was at a time when you went to the store and bought CDs in 2002, and he would go every Saturday and buy dozens of CDs. And I'm talking all genres of music, from electronic music to country music. And you could have a discussion with him about every new artist. He knows them all.
And that curiosity and that desire for new music at that age is unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't think that ever goes away. I think he'll always have that.
Can you give when you're working with an artist like Elton or Morrissey, whether it's in a production or a mixing capacity, can you give feedback in the same way that you would perhaps a younger band? Or is it you would make a suggestion to someone like Elton, and if he doesn't agree, then you just move on? Is it a different dynamic?
I think it depends on the exact situation, but I'm never shy about offering my opinion, unfortunately. No, I think that's your job. I think you have to. I mean, if you really feel something and it's, just doesn't feel right, or you think it can be better, or, I've brought up lyrics to artists, and a lot of artists are very, very personal and very sensitive about their lyrics, and kind of getting involved in that is maybe not always welcome. But if I've felt like I've had to do that, if there was a sort of red flag, if something just didn't sit right with me, I'm gonna bring it up. I just feel like it's my job. I'm there to help make a better record, and that's part of it. And yeah, I mean, I think you say what you feel will really help the cause. I'm all in. I'm 110% in on every album I do, and I'm not gonna hold back. I mean, if the climate is not right, where somebody's frustrated and angry and doesn't need another voice in there, then I'm going to hold it till tomorrow or whenever the climate's better. But if I think it can really improve things, I won't be shy about it.
In the studio, because you have to have some difficult conversations, how do you keep a session on track? How do you, if you sense that your feedback hasn't been well received, are there techniques that you can use to keep the ball rolling and to not let that derail anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, sometimes it's down to like, hey, I just got to put it out there. I'm cool. Think about it. Maybe a week from now it'll make sense. Maybe a week from now you'll still feel the same. I'm good, but I just, had to get it out there. Me, I'm just big mouthed, just got to say so, and, you make light of it. But it's out there. And, I'll say I've had the privilege to work with some great A&R guys and great producers. And sometimes you just have to put something out there in the room and have people hear it. They don't have to react to it or do anything at the time. And maybe down the line, days, weeks, whatever, all of a sudden it sort of makes sense, or it magically seeps into the process, because
Right.
you've put it out there. It's in the back of everybody's mind, and maybe they're like avoiding this thing that the manager said one day, and a constructive criticism, but they're like quietly not going there. And so you kind of have to put it out there. But I think it's just gauging like when to do it, and to do it with seriousness or with levity.
Yeah, such a fascinating insight. I think I mentioned earlier the jigsaw puzzle of making a record. It's quite incredible. So we've spoken a little bit about some of the artists you're working with currently. Are there other projects that you're also involved in right now?
Yes, a bunch of different things. Percy Howard, who I mentioned earlier. I'm going to do an album really soon with Middle Class Rut, band that I've worked with in the past. I mixed some things for them some time ago, and we're going to do an album together. Another Oxbow record. I'm a part of this sort of collective called Dusty Bear. We're doing some ambient music, sort of, I don't know how you describe it, but ambient is probably the best word. Film composer friend and also A&R friend that we do this stuff together and share files back and forth and pieces and collaborate and work on that. And
Nice.
so there's a lot of different things in the works.
How many records do you think you do a year? Is there a typical number?
I think it depends. Often I won't mix a record, maybe because I don't feel like I'm the right mixer, or feels like I'm too close to it and I need an outside opinion. But on an average, I would say 4 to 5 albums a year.
Okay.
6, 8 weeks on a record, something like that.
And you throw yourself wholeheartedly into each album. Is there a recovery process afterwards?
Yes. Yes. Sometimes it comes at the end of those 4 or 5 albums. Sometimes it's in between. Yes, definitely. So yeah, you really do. The interesting thing though, it's kind of cool sometimes. We talked about bouncing different genres and all, and sometimes it's kind of refreshing, maybe 1 minute doing a jazz album and the next minute doing something really heavy. It's like palate cleansing, or sushi one day and Italian food the next. And it's a good thing. I like to keep fresh, and I like to try new things, and I like to push myself to different places. So that really helps me.
Joe, just before we finish up, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Oh, wow. I mean, so many people. I can't really specifically single out anybody, but no, I mean, there have been a lot of people that have really helped sort of be touchstone, or maybe the bar or the benchmark, and pushed me to get better at what I do. And sometimes it really even just seeing the guy in the band and seeing how dedicated he is to what he's doing and how deep he dives, and you're like, oh man, I'm really skating. I gotta dig in deeper here, So no, I'm sorry, I can't really give you a bunch of specific people, but
That's okay, no problem at all. Joe, thanks so much for your time. It's been so great to hear about all your experiences and your incredible career, which is still going and still going strong. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, my pleasure.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Joe for his time, and thank you for listening. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.